NIL Now with Lauren Sisler and Kevin Jones.
If you want to learn more about name, image, and likeness, you need to go to The Source. The NIL Now podcast from Headline Studio and Reddit highlights the biggest storylines with comments from key guests in the college and high school NIL space.
NIL is not a cherry on top. It needs to be thought about as a part of these young men and women's future to, further their careers. You should be able to leave college with something.
Subscribe to NIL Now on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Well, we're going to keep moving the chains as it is Tuesday. We are out of the woods of free agency. The Bengals, though, still making one more move ahead of the month of April where the focus is draft. But before we get to the draft, we want to talk about where things are for the Bengals in-house, taking stock of the offense and what that means moving forward. Welcome into another off-season free agency draft. Take it all in edition of the Strictly Stripes podcast. Muhammad Ahmad and Andrew Gillis joining you once again to bring you all the goods and all the biggest talking points for the Bengals this offseason. And Andrew, I think there's really no better place to start than just kind of taking stock of where the offensive depth chart is, here and now, where we think it's going to be in the coming weeks, because obviously, like we said, the draft is coming, and what that means for the Bengals ahead of 2023. So what I wanted to do, and I wish Mike and Isaac was with us because I'd kind of love for him to join us on this, but since it's just you and I, what I wanted to do is we're going to go through every position group on the Bengals offense, from left tackle to quarterback. I'm just kidding. Left tackle to wide receiver. And then we're going to look at all the players at those positions, how good we think they are, how much better they could be, or if we think some of those positions might have some drop-off and why that's the case. So I want to start with left tackle because that's where, obviously the biggest splash was for the Bengals this offseason with Orlando Brown. So from top to bottom on the depth chart, you have Orlando Brown, presumably Jackson Carman right behind him, and then Deontay Smith, who's been a backup tackle, an occasional swing tackle for the Bengals since he was drafted in 2021. So looking at those three at that position, will the Bengals be better, the same, or worse at left tackle in 2023? I mean, obviously it's an easy answer, but I want your take on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to be better. Orlando Brown, he's not, a Trent Williams level player in two ways. I think, one, in terms of kind of how elite he is. I think, Orlando Brown is a pretty good left tackle. He's solidified the position for 4 years, and, you're going to get above average left tackle play from him. But he's not kind of in that kind of conversation among the top 5, whatever left tackles in the sport, I don't believe. And all, his athleticism or his lack thereof too, I think kind of hinders him a little bit. He's not, someone that, I mean, we saw Trent Williams kind of used as like a man in motion in San Francisco. You can't really do that with Orlando Brown. So, with Orlando, it's certainly an upgrade. Even though kind of it sounded like I was kind of negative on him, certainly an upgrade. He's pretty good in pass protection. And I think you have to be feeling pretty good about where you're at this year and kind of moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have a level-headed perspective on it. Obviously it's going to be some of the best play they've had at that position since Andrew Whitworth left in 2016. Could say one of the best players at that position in Bengals history, Whitworth was. For the last 6-7 years, they just haven't gotten that oomph that he brought. And I think Brown's going to bring that. It might not be Hall of Fame, Trent Williams level oomph, but there's going to be some oomph that they haven't had, if that's even a word. I just made it up, in the last 7 years. I also think there's something to be said about Jackson Carman because obviously, I would think he's not going to be a starter next year on either side of the ball, left or right on the offensive line. But when you look at the kind of depth he provides as a backup, like he had a left tackle in the playoffs last year, I think you have to consider that too. Now, the big question with Deontay Smith is what do you do with him? Do you put him on the practice squad? Do you use a roster spot on him? Because obviously they're very bloated, which we'll get to in a second. But With him, I've said this before, he's been kind of a failed project. He hasn't really given them what they're looking for, but that doesn't really hurt them. So I'm with you. I think they get better at that in 2023, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that. So for keeping score, it's 1-0 in favor of the Bengals. Anytime we think they're going to get better, we'll give them a point. If not, they lose a point, and if it stays the same, it's a tie. So win, loss, or tie, kind of like a record. So moving over on the line, left guard. Right now, it just looks like it's obviously Cordell Volson, presumably going to be the starter next year. And I have Nate Gilliam behind him on the practice squad because some of the depth charts have Max Trupping behind him, which I think is a little bit offsetting because he's really at right guard, which we'll get to. But you have Cordell Volson and Nate Gilliam, unless they add some reinforcements there or do some rearrangements. What do you think? Are we going to see Cordell Volson do better? Is it going to be kind of a steady stagnation, or are you concerned about him next year?
Well, first things first, I think with the scoring system, I think we can add ties to this too, because I think there are some down this list where you can say they're the same.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I mean.
But I don't know. So I was going to say, I don't know if it's 1-0. I think it could be 1-0 to nothing.
There you go. That's clear. Yeah.
At left guard, I think I think you can make a case that Cordell is going to improve. When you have somebody who is a rookie who steps in as a rookie, especially someone who's not, coming in as, a first round pick out of Alabama or Notre Dame or some big kind of powerhouse program. There is an adjustment, especially if you're coming from a place like North Dakota State. I think he made the transition well. You kind of saw him improve as the year went on. Now with Orlando Brown there, you get a bigger wingspan. You get somebody who covers up more ground. Those two guys are pretty big on that left side of the line. I think Cordell's going to have a better year two than he did year one. So I'm going to say they're improved at that position, even though you have the same player.
I agree with you. And, Brian Callahan talked a lot about this at the end of last year. And again, this was during the end of last year. He's not a rookie anymore. Like he said, he is not a rookie anymore. So his rookie season was pretty short because, maybe 12, 13 weeks in, he was already out of his rookie league. So, and I'm not saying, he's like this big, like you said, powerhouse player. I mean, unless you consider North Dakota State a powerhouse outside of the FBS, which it is. I think, with that, all that size and that just really all that muscle and all that height, man, it's going to make them one of the biggest left sides in the NFL. I mean, I'd have to look at statistically who are the taller left tackle, left guard combos, but I would have to think that a 6'8" Orlando Brown and a 6'7" Cordell Volson are up there. So I'm with you. I think they get better. I think Cordell Volson's going to maybe learn from some of the mishaps he had at different points in the year last year, which is not on him. I think it's just a matter of growth. So I guess I should say it should be 4-0 because I think we each give a point based on our take. So we both gave a point in favor of left tackle. So that's 2.
No, I think it's 2-0. And then we just individually, so we have it. Yeah. So it's, okay. I could have a different record than you do at the end.
So we're not going to double it is what you're saying.
Yeah. Don't double it.
Okay. No doubling down. All right, Andrew. All right. So it's 2-0, 2-0 Bengals offense as far as the depth chart goes. All right. Center. This is an interesting one. I have to put some thought into this one. Really, it's pretty simple. You have Ted Karras, who's going to, I would think, almost automatically be the starter next year, and Trey Hill behind him. Didn't play much, got a few snaps in garbage time last year in games like against Carolina, but really not much action from a guy like him who's going into his third year. What do you think, Andrew? Are they going to be better at that position? Are they going to be the same, or is there something we don't know that might be a drop-off there?
I think you're going to be the same. I think if the additions that you made with Orlando Brown at left tackle, with kind of, and I don't want this to sound like an addition, but if Cordell Volson continues to improve, maybe, I don't know, like whatever is going to happen at right tackle, I don't know. Like I think the whole offensive line could be better, but I think if you get the same level of play, kind of if everything Ted Karras gave you on and off the field last year or last season, I should say, if you get that from Ted in 2023, I think you're going to be pretty happy. I think that's what you're going to get. So I'm going to say they're going to be the same at center in 2023. I don't want the same to be a bad thing. I think, in some cases it could be, hey, this team is kind of where it was a year ago. They need to improve. But I mean, in some cases you don't need to improve at every position that, you kind of look at reasonably, just because there's, it's impossible to do that. So I think, this is one of those things where you're feeling good about where you're at because you liked where you were the year before.
That's definitely an important distinction. I want to say that stagnation's not bad. If you're keeping something good, that's where, like you say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So that's something we want to specify, and I'm glad you clarified that. I was a little bit torn on this one because Ted Karras is going to be 30, I think, at the end of next season. And so age is catching up to a guy like that. Nothing on him. I mean, him as a player, I think he was the MVP of that offensive line last year, just truthfully, not just from a play standpoint, but from a leadership standpoint. But the question is, how long is he going to be able to have that kind of glass eater mantra? Because, I think against Buffalo, he had kind of a nagging knee injury that he played through, which credit to him, that was remarkable. But how long will he be able to do that? I think he has a lot left in the tank for 2023, though, and that's why I say stay the same. So makes it 2-1. So 2-0-1 if we're looking at it like a football record, because we're staying the same at center. Moving over to right guard, we got Alex Kappa back in the saddle after he missed out on most of the Bengals playoff run. I guess all of the playoff run because he got hurt before the playoffs. And then behind him, Max Sharping, who the Bengals are bringing back for another year on a 1-year contract. Better, same, or worse, Andrew?
At right guard, I think you're the same. I think you can make a case that Alex Kappa was the best lineman that they had last year. He's certainly the most consistent lineman, I thought. He played really well, and I think you could kind of see what his loss meant. In that AFC title game where Chris Jones kind of had a really, really good game against them and in Arrowhead, and I think having Alex Kappa in that game. I'm not saying they would have won if they had Alex Kappa, but you certainly would have noticed, or you certainly noticed that he was not in the lineup. So I think you're feeling good about right guard. So I'm going to say the same as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think with Max Sharping, I was very critical of him just based on how he filled in for Kappa. I mean, you could say he was one of the most bullied linemen in that AFC Championship game, especially when, you look at how those first two drives ended. That's where I was very harsh. I think maybe piercing in my critique, but he's a veteran. He's a body. And again, I think there's a reason why it's only a short-term 1-year deal. I think with Kappa, you look at how well he played last year. Obviously, it sucks for him that he got hurt, but I think that he'll, like I said, he's healthy now. He's recovered. He'll be good to go in, training camp, and should be another breakout year for him. But now here is the fun part, because this is where the circus starts, right? Tackle. So looking at what seems to be, again, because there's a lot of uncertainty here, what seems to be the depth chart, you have Jonah Williams at the top, since the Bengals want to obviously move him there. La'el Collins behind him, who's still nursing his ACL tear that he suffered against New England at the end of last year. Cody Ford, who they just picked up from Arizona on a 1-year deal, and Hakeem Adeniji, who was the backup to La'el Collins, who was also a swing tackle before he became the starter in place of Collins. This is, I know there's obviously a lot of moving parts to this, but just looking at this, assuming that this is what it is, assuming it's Williams, Collins, Ford, Adeniji. If we're looking at it in that order, not pending a Williams trade, or if La'el Collins is a post-June first cut, if this is what you have at right tackle, are you better, the same, or worse in 2023?
Yeah, I think with Jonah, you're better. I was feeling pretty decent about kind of where Jonah was going to be in 2023, before the offseason really happened, because, I think it was clear that he was kind of playing through some pain. It was a hard season for him in terms of injuries. We got hurt against Baltimore, had to kind of fight through that. He got hurt against Baltimore again at the end of the year. Like, I think you could really make a good case that Jonah was kind of on track to have a nice bounce back year in a contract year. So you're feeling good about Jonah, and Cody Ford. We'll see, they make that signing. They're trying to bring him back to his college level like that. Again, we'll see where he's at in camp, but with La'el, it's health. So it's all related to Jonah. If Jonah's the right tackle in week 1, you're feeling better about the situation than you were a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago. If Jonah is not there, even if you draft Anton Harrison, Juwan Jones, Darnell Wright, like even if you draft a rookie, you're probably feeling worse about that in the very short term in 2023, just because hey, maybe it takes, 8 to 10 games for that rookie to get going, whatever it is, it might take a little bit of time. So I think if Jonah's the right tackle, you're feeling better about the position as a whole. But if it's a rookie, you're probably feeling worse. You got some questions.
That's the thing. Like that's a good distinction to make, and that's why I said just based on what we have in front of us, what we know about who is on the roster right now, I think you could say they'll be better if Williams doesn't get traded or doesn't go far enough to hold out, which I wouldn't think he'd leave over $12 million on the table. But yeah, assuming he's there, and then maybe Lyle recovers and he's used as a swing tackle, and then Cody Ford and Hakeem Adeniji just kind of lay back in the saddle, I think they get better. I mean, I think Williams played better at left tackle than he had in previous years, including that Super Bowl year in 2021. But I think that just, with that skill set, I mean, obviously it's not a rare switch. I mean, it's been done before in the NFL, but it's certainly a challenging one, but one that I think he can do and do well. And that's why I say whether you have Williams, again, well, I guess based on this, but even if you don't have Williams, or maybe you start Lyle, he's healthy, and you got a rookie who can get in there sooner than later if needed be, I think you're in good shape. So it's 3-0 to 1. 3-0 to 1 for the Bengals offense. All right, moving over to the tight end, and there's one name in here we'll talk about.
Wait a minute. 3-0 to 1.
Oh no, 4. I'm sorry, 4. Yeah, you're right. I was one number off.
Well, no, I think it isn't. Didn't we agree? Is 3-0 2?
Wait, you said right tackle is? Did you say they were going to get
right
better?
tackle is? Yeah, okay. I said right tackle is. Okay, so you're 4-0 1. There you go.
That's what I meant. Yeah. Sorry, yeah. So I figured that's what you said. Bear with us. It's Ramadan, so your boy is fasting. So my numbers and my addition might not be up to par. So bear with us, guys. But yes, 4-0 to 1. Moving into tight end, one name in here, like I said, we'll talk about later in the show, but worth mentioning for the sake of depth. You have Irv Smith Jr., the newest Cincinnati Bengal, I should add, reportedly added to the team yesterday per NFL Network's Peter Schrager, signing a 1-year deal. First tight end move they made this offseason after losing Hayden Hurst, Mitchell Wilcox, Drew Sample, still both free agents, which is worth acknowledging for the next guys I'm going to mention. Other than that, though, you have Devin Asiasi, the only active roster tight end on the team. And then on the practice squad, you have Tanner Hudson and Nick Bowers. Now, clearly, Andrew, this is far from a complete roster. They're certainly going to have to draft someone, and I think they're going to have to bring back either Wilcox or Sample, and we can talk more about that later in the show. But just from what you see right now, you bring in Smith Jr., and you've got 2 practice squad guys. You got Asiasi. Better, the worse, or same next year?
By the way, it is 3-0 2 because I had center and right guard is the same. But
you did.
Yeah, at tight end, I think. I mean, there's no conceivable world in which you say that you're feeling better about tight end or even the same about tight end. And I don't mean that as disrespect to Irv Smith. I'm actually really, really high on that signing. I think that he's going to make for a nice addition. But when you lose kind of your entire room, from a year ago. You have a situation where, okay, Devin Asiasi, he didn't really play a lot. Irv Smith is now de facto tight end 1, while, Irv Smith is kind of in a unique situation where, he hasn't really had an opportunity to kind of be a standout tight end. And, the Bengals need another inline blocker. I think they're going to get one in the draft. Now it doesn't have to be a Michael Mayer, Darnell Washington, Dalton Kincaid. It doesn't have to be a guy early. It can be somebody in rounds 2, 3, and 4, something like that, where you can feel a little better about where you're at because you have another body there. You have somebody who can actually play the position. But yeah, you have to feel worse about tight end. One, because you're adding Irv Smith, who's got all the potential to be a really, really high impact guy who at this time next year is signing a 3-year, $21 million deal elsewhere. Right now, though, that's not the case. So I'm feeling worse about tight end for the Bengals than I was back in the season.
Yeah, I'm with you, Andrew. I am unanimously with you on that. With respect to Irv Smith Jr. and whoever the Bengals draft, even if it's Michael Mayer and Devin Asiasi and potentially either Wilcox or Sample, if one of them is back in 2023. I mean, we can't underestimate. Like, Hayden Hurst was one of the highest paid tight ends on the market this offseason. Now, obviously, what he got last year is what Irv Smith is getting now, a prove-it deal. And we'll talk more about kind of the optics of these kinds of prove-it deals that these tight ends have signed in Cincinnati the last few years. But we don't really know what he's going to give. I mean, he was decent in Minnesota for the last couple of years. He was a stud at Alabama. I'm sure Joe Burrow could comment on that. The first time he played against Alabama at LSU, he probably saw some good observations there that I think will be worth asking about, in the offseason. But, I mean, Devin Asiasi didn't play a whole heck of a lot. I think, again, Wilcox or Sample, one of them has to come back. But do I think they have enough of a presence to really complement what Hayden Hurst is leaving behind? I just don't. I think they bring enough that's necessary to have in that room from a leadership standpoint and from a depth standpoint. But Hayden Hurst light, I just don't see it. And again, unless there's something I don't see with Tanner Hudson and Nick Bowers, if they elevate one of them next year for whatever reason, even then I just don't see why they'd be better. So I guess that would be our first downside of any position group. So tell me if I'm wrong. 3-1-2. Is that right, Andrew? 3-1-2.
Well, let's see. We're at 5 positions. So that
6
is
positions.
6. And I was at 5 positions on the O-line. Tight end.
Right.
That sounds right. That math checks
3-1-2. Yeah, because we said the same for right guard and tackle. Or no, I'm sorry, right guard and center. Better at both tackles and left guard. Downside on tight end. Okay, so we're good. Like I said, we can do basic math. All right, running back. This is going to be a fun one. Still have Joe Mixon, as cloudy as his future might seem. And then beyond that, you just have Travion Williams and Chris Evans. I think my tone and my voice kind of already gives that away, Andrew. Are we not feeling good about this one next year?
At running back, no. Yeah, I still think they're going to add somebody in the draft. I think it's pretty clear that they're going to do that. I mean, and again, you could make a case that this goes from, really, really tough situation at running back. What are you going to do? Who knows? I'm not even going to say Bijan's name. But, if you end up with a Jahmyr Gibbs or a Zach Charbonnet, like, you're feeling pretty decent about that. So I mean, this is obviously an incomplete, but for now you're obviously feeling worse about it.
Yeah, I mean, again, kind of like tight end, it's an incomplete. But I think even then, like if you want to look at it from an incomplete standpoint and a future standpoint, I still don't. I don't feel great. I just don't feel as bad as I could feel, or as some people could feel. But I don't feel great because I don't know that Joe Mixon is going to really bring the juice next year. Unless he proves a lot of people wrong, I just don't see it. Assuming he's even still on the roster, which I'd like to think is going to be the case after everything that we've talked about on this podcast. But whether it's Devin Achane, Jack Charbonnet, or any other guy, Jahmyr Gibbs, we don't know how they're going to fit into that system. Obviously, they value efficiency more than productivity, so they're not going to get all the snaps in the world like you get in some systems. But will they provide that efficiency that Brian Callahan and Zach Taylor look for? We don't know, but they already don't have a very high opinion of Chris Evans, which, I mean, we saw kind of how that transpired for him at the end of last year. Travion Williams, I mean, I don't think he's going to be half of what Samaje Perine was with respect to him. As far as a kick returner, that's different. I think that's going to be good for them at kick returner if that's the guy. So that's different. I'm not going to comment on that. But as far as, do you really think he can step up like Perine did? Not by a long shot. And so that's where I don't feel as good at running back, even from an incomplete and predictionary standpoint. So we are at 3-2-2. 3-2-2. All right. So we're going to keep moving through the depth chart. Somewhat last but not least, wide receiver. Just to go through the order of what we've got, you have Jamar Chase, of course, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Trenton Irwin, who I would think is going to be the number 4 receiver after earning that role last year, and then Stanley Morgan at number 5, who really doesn't play much, if any, receiver at all, but is a valuable special teams piece who is a wide receiver. So you have Morgan at number 5. I think this is an easy one. Better, Andrew? I think this is going to be I think it's going to be better for the Bengals next year. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's going to have to be the same. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you can kind of look at the receivers that you got, and I mean, Jamar Chase is one of the best receivers in the league. He obviously had I know he missed some time last year. He missed 4 games, but again, teams tried to take the top off of the defense, and, his numbers kind of suffered as a result. But he's obviously still an elite receiver, one of the best in the game. That's not changing. I think he's in the top 5. Like, I don't, unless you think Jamar is going to become the consensus best receiver in the league, like, I don't know how much better you can really expect from him. I mean, he's just already really good. T. Higgins through 3 years has been remarkably consistent. I mean, in 3 years, listen to his targets: 108, 110, 109. So
wow.
You know what you're getting out of T. Higgins, because in those 3 years, 67 catches, 74 catches, 74 catches. His yards per reception, 13.6, 14.7, 13.9. You know what you're getting out of T. You're getting about 1,000 yards. You're getting a guy who's, going to get over 100 targets, who's going to have about, 70 catches, give or take. Tyler Boyd, same thing. You know what you're getting with TB. I don't know how you could really reasonably expect more out of this position than what you've kind of gotten in the last few years.
That's a tough one. Actually, now you're making me reconsider my own thoughts, but that's why we do these podcasts, because there's always more than one answer. I mean, I just think, this is a tough one, because you're right. I don't know that Jamar Chase is going to be that Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson top receiver. I think there's a case with Stephon Diggs. I think with respect to Stephon Diggs, you could maybe have a conversation as to where Jamar Chase ranks with him. But yeah, if we're talking top of the cream de la cream, respectfully, unless he proves all of us wrong, probably not the case. But the fact that he's had over 1,000 yards in each of his last 2 years, even given the fact he missed 4 games last year to a hip injury, where he still put up really good numbers and made the Pro Bowl, I think he will be better. I don't know that he'll be number one receiver elite better, but I think he'll be better. I think Higgins, with how remarkably consistent he is, at the very least, he stays the same, but he could get better too. Maybe where I will consider your point is Tyler Boyd is going to be nearing the age of 30. This could be, I think this is the last year on his deal, right? I mean, this could be the last year he's a Cincinnati Bengal. We don't know what they're going to get out of him on his final year. So I don't know. Now that I think about it, and again, I would say just more, if they're not going to be this exact same, they'll only be just marginally better, but just marginally better is not much better. So I guess I'll go with you and say they'll be the same. So that makes it 3, 2, and 3. 3 positions getting better, 2 the same. No, 2 getting worse and 3 the same. 3, 2, 3. 3 better, 2 worse, 3 the same. Yeah, I think that sounds about right. All right, last but not least, quarterback. I'm just kidding. Well, I mean, honestly, I guess we could maybe touch on this a little bit. I mean, you can never talk about Joe Burrow enough. How do you feel about, I guess, maybe not even just Burrow, but if Brandon Allen's not back next year, I mean, do you really think there's anything that, in a worst case scenario where Joe Burrow gets hurt and you need a backup? I mean, is there anything to take away from that at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see kind of what happens with the backup quarterback. I'm not quite sure, what's going to happen there. Maybe they add somebody in the draft, and I don't know. And, I made this point earlier in the offseason. You are kind of reaching that point where you don't need a veteran in the room to kind of have around, because, Joe is a younger player. I mean, Joe's kind of he's getting up there in terms of experience in his career. As crazy as that is to say, he's going into his 4th year. He's going to turn 27 during the course of the 2023 season. So you need a younger guy, but to me that really doesn't matter. I mean, it's going to be the same.
I agree.
With quarterback, because I think if you want to kind of evaluate him in the grand scope of the league, I mean, there are a lot of people right now who, if you were doing a quarterback draft, and I think Bengals fans, if given truth serum, you're kind of understanding, hey, look, we'd rather Patrick Mahomes. Personally, you might disagree. But if you had to restart the Bengals and the Chiefs franchise, and you had the first overall pick, you're taking Patrick Mahomes. Now, if you have the second overall pick, there's a lot of people who are going to take Joe Burrow. So unless you think Burrow is going to overtake Mahomes, in my view, it's going to stay the same. But again, that's one of those things where it's a little bit like I said in the Ted Karras kind of evaluation. Sometimes staying the same is good, and in this case, it's really good. So yeah, you're feeling really, really good about where you're at quarterback for not just this year, but for the next decade.
Do we even give this a vote? I guess, I don't know. I mean, I guess we have to because it's a position. Okay, so I guess stay the same or better. I guess what? Better or same? Which one do you want to put it in? As far as points.
Same with quarterback.
So that would make it 3, 2, and 4. So it's 3. So rounding it all up, 3 positions will get better. 2 will not. They will actually regress based on how things look. And then 4 will stay about the same. So just to kind of break it down specifically, so left tackle, left guard will get better. Sounds like center, right guard will stay the same. Right tackle gets better. Tight end, regress. Running back, regress. Wide receiver, stay the same. And quarterback, of course, as we just said, stay the same. Stay with us. We're going to wrap up talking a little bit more about the Bengals' latest free agent move, what that means for the 2023 NFL Draft, and an interesting question we're posing on the offensive line. All of that to come right here on the Strictly Stripes podcast. Hey there, it's Muhammad Ahmad from the Strictly Stripes podcast, and if you still don't know what Cincinnati Football Insider is, listen up. It's a community of fans who want the inside scoop on the Bengals and a direct connection to the podcast and the reporters who cover the team. Here's how it works. Andrew, Mike, and I will text your phone a few times a day with breaking news, analysis, and our insights on the Bengals. And it's the inside scoop on what we're hearing. And we're giving you the inside word before it even hits social media. If you join Cincinnati Football Insider, you get to participate on the podcast, and you can text us directly. It's a great way to cut through the clutter of social media for just $4.99 a month. Still not sure? Just try it for 2 weeks, and if you don't like it, you can text the word STOP at any time, but you won't want to cancel once you join the community of hardcore Bengals fans. So here's how you get on board. Text 513-940-4193 or go to cleveland.com/Bengals and click on the blue banner at the top of the page. It's a great time to join as we're covering the NFL Draft, OTAs, mini camps, and much more to come later this year. So give us a try for 2 weeks and see what you think. Just text again the number 513-940-4193. All right, and thanks for staying with us on the Strictly Stripes podcast. So as we mentioned earlier when we were doing our rankings, Andrew, we saw that the Bengals obviously late last night, added Irv Smith Jr., spent the last 4 seasons with the Minnesota Vikings, come from a good pedigree of football. His dad, Irv Smith Sr., played almost a decade in the NFL during the 90s. So, he played for Alabama, played for Nick Saban. You got a good resume there. And much like they did with Hayden Hurst, they gave him a 1-year prove-it deal. So who knows, maybe he plays his tail off and gets $24 million somewhere else like, Hurst did or like CJ Uzomah did last year. So just looking at it, I mean, the way the Bengals went about it with like a 1-year prove-it deal, kind of 2 parts to this. Number one, do you like the approach? Like, do you think this approach of just bringing in tight ends on like a short-term rental, do you think it's the right way to go? And then regardless of whether it's the right way to go or not, what does that mean for the number 20th overall pick in this year's draft?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the right way to go about it. I think it makes sense, because you're gonna. I mean, this is a pretty marketable position. Like, you can go around to other free agents that are going to be receivers and tight ends and say like, hey, look, if you want to come here for 1 year, the market wasn't what you wanted. Come here for a year, get your money, and then you can peace out. And I think that's a nice, a nice little marketing pitch for players that are free agents. But I don't think that's necessarily sustainable. It's kind of like, if you want to compare it to something, I think it would be a little bit like the transfer portal in college football, because if you're just going to keep bringing in these rentals, these guys who, hey, they're basically mercenaries, they're hired guns. Sure, it could work, but you don't really have any long-term stability there. And 2, if one of them flops, like let's say, like I said, I'm really high on Irv Smith Jr. You don't really have a lot of production to kind of look at. He missed the entire 2021 season. In 2022, he had an ankle injury, and then the Vikings traded for TJ Hawkinson. Like it's kind of hard to judge what he could do in a number one role. But I like kind of betting on his athletic upside and kind of the past that he's had. But if it doesn't work out with Irv Smith and you say, hey, look, we're fine, or next year, you draft a third or fourth round guy this year, and next year you do the same thing with a free agent, and that like you start to put yourself in a position where, okay, well now we haven't really had good tight end play for the last 2 years or whatever it is. Like I still think, every team ideally would like to have a guy, that you have in-house that you can build upon for a handful of years. If you draft a tight end at 28th overall, which I'm not saying it makes this less likely, I just think it, if you didn't have a tight end going into the draft, if you didn't sign Irv Smith, you have to draft a tight end in the first 3 rounds and maybe the first 2, because you need somebody there. But now, if you don't draft the tight end till round 3, I think you're feeling okay about that. So it lessens the need for a tight end. I really like the signing. I think that eventually you'd like to find a guy in the draft that you can control for, 4 to 5 years.
I like what you explained about kind of what that means if they want to move forward, some type of way, in 2024, if like, say it doesn't work out the way that they would have anticipated, like they can do more with another draft pick later on. And that gives you more flexibility to do more with that 20th overall pick. If you really want to get a project tackle to potentially, I should say, replace Jonah Williams either now or in the future, depending on what happens to him, you could do that. If there's an edge rush you really like and you think you're good at tackle, you can absolutely do that. So it gives them more flexibility, and I think the good thing with a deal like this is I would imagine, we don't know the exact terms, but it's a cap-friendly deal, I would think, and you need that with, I love to keep saying this term, the Joe Burrow contract extension era. Anything and everything helps in terms of the cap, so you can't go wrong with that if you're the Bengals. So, it's a good rental. You could get a lot out of him, and, again, I mentioned this earlier, I kind of asked Joe Burrow, Burrow's first year at Alabama, Burrow's first year at LSU when they played Alabama. Gosh, it's been a long day. It wasn't quite like the rematch a year later, which was one of the greatest college football games ever, but LSU got blown out 29-0, and Irv Smith had a great game, if I remember correctly, in that 2018 matchup. And I'm sure, Burrow is standing on the sideline, watching this guy. Maybe he had a scouting report of him. And now whatever he saw then, he gets to throw to him now. So we're going to see how that plays out. And, again, I think it's going to be interesting to get Burrow's thoughts in the coming weeks and months. But, yeah, I think that's it gives a lot of clarity, because I wondered what they were going to do just in general. Were they going to bring back Wilcox? Were they going to bring back Sample? Was there anyone else on the market they were looking at? Because the market seemed kind of dry. And I still think it was pretty dry, even looking at it now. But, I mean, at this point, do you even bring back Wilcox? Do you bring back Drew Sample? Like, assuming you draft someone, do you need one of those guys? Or do you just count on Ossie to be that Mitch Wilcox / Drew Sample?
Well, I think you count on Ossie to be what Ossie was last year, which is kind of a depth tight end, kind of a role player. And I think they're pretty set on drafting a guy, and I think that's going to be the direction that they go. So, yeah, I wouldn't expect a ton of movement free agency wise at tight end. But I mean, if they do, I think that kind of tells us a little bit more about where they're headed, because right now I think it's pretty clear that.
Yeah, definitely. And who knows, maybe one of them comes back or none of them do, but they're not the only unsigned free agents left with the Bengals. I mean, we talked about Eli Apple, we'll talk about Trey Flowers, as much as I think they're going to be done with those two. I mean, there's still some names that are out there, but that's kind of what came to mind. But stay with us as we look at the defensive depth chart tomorrow, give our grades and takes on that. Mike Nizick will be back to join us later this week to keep things going afloat. But once again, for myself and Andrew, I'm Mohammed Ahmad. See you on Wednesday.